So, I'm happy to see you again here. I hope you had a pleasant lunch break and a lot of good conversations. It's really an honor for me to introduce Antonello Monti, or Professor Monti. We have a bit of history together. When I first met him, that was while one of my bachelor students back then defended his bachelor's thesis. And he was sitting there and was a professor supervising it. And yeah, this bachelor student, I think he is meanwhile upstairs, he wrote solar integration in Everest, and then he presented everything. He had to leave the room, and then we just talked about Everest, not the student. Then, like, at the end of this 20-minute discussion about Everest, we should join the Linux Foundation Energy. Like, okay, what do we do about the student? Yeah, he gets an A. All good. It was really amazing, and you brought us into Linux Foundation Energy. You're head of the Technical Advisory Committee. And together with the Eon Energy Research Center in Fraunhofer, I think you're quite influential in the energy space from the RWTH Aachen. And yeah, happy to hear you today.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. And I must say, bringing Everest in LFE was one of the best things we did in LFE, because what you're bringing to LFE in terms of visibility and impact is really amazing. And I was just talking last week about the yearly review, and Everest was on top of every attention in the foundation for the impact. Today I will talk about, not about my research per se, but more about my experience being involved in this open source community. You had Linux Foundation Europe. Later we'll have the boss of LFE talking. I will come more from my perspective as an academic to be involved in this adventure of the Linux Foundation Energy, to understand how that is really fitting with the transformation in the energy system, but also with the challenges that I face. My main counterpart in industry are the grid operators, and I can tell you that it's not easy to bring these people to understand what we're trying to do with open source and why it makes sense. You heard already from my colleague Veit before about the energy transformation. Don't need to spend too much time about it, but fundamentally we are completely changing the way we use the infrastructure. This is the bottom line. And transforming a system that was very much unidirectional in a complexity of interaction of multiple actors that also need, on top of that, more and more intelligence to make this thing possible. And among the actors, one very important one I want to use to start from is the customer, because when you think about the energy transition or transformation, the real change is the new role of the customers. So I have to begin with a little bit of history of the customers. The customer used to be the less relevant part of the energy system. But in a nutshell, the one paying the bill, connected through a not so smart system. There was the old meter. There was no communication with the utility, no need to exchange data, and unfortunately this is still the case for many of us in Germany that don't have a modern type of interconnection. When I started my institute about 15 years ago, everybody was talking about smart meter as the big revolution. That revolution didn't really happen, to be honest. After 15 years in Germany, we are still talking about the rollout of smart meters, and only a few countries had really a change driven by smart meter, but the smart meter didn't bring that element of revolution we were expecting 15 years ago. It is coming somehow, but it's been an extremely slow process and didn't come to what we expected. At the same time, the whole energy system has been changing radically. What a customer is today has nothing to do with the customer was 15 years ago. And there are tons of new elements that are relevant to the grid infrastructure, PV, battery, heat pumps, and of course, because we are in this conference, the e-mobility part. And it's a very complex system, but it also cannot be operated in autarky. So there are a lot of people talking about autarky. That doesn't make any sense to me. you have to be part of the grid, which is the community, and anyway, it's not even possible. I live in NRV, I did everything I can do as a citizen to make my house green. I still need the grid heavily, and I depend deeply on the grid. Things will change even more when we not only have e-mobility, but we have possibility of real vehicle to grid, so that will increase the options and situation, and this is still in the context of a situation which the interface to the grid is still fundamental. We will have millions of systems like this one in Germany, even more across Europe, and there will be the fundamental cells around which the grid will develop. And nevertheless, and that's where comes the link to the open source, what we have is that if you try to do this, I learned a lot myself transforming my house. You have literally interoperability among assets. That's really a nightmare. There are strong vendor lock-in, even beyond what makes sense. Some I don't understand, simply. Lack of freedom. I try to combine data from different sources, from the different devices I have at home. It takes an incredible amount of work, and it's not working at the end. And the data exchange with grid operator is still quite limited. For some process, even if you have a smart meter, it doesn't work. Still, I receive from my grid operator a paper saying, tell me the numbers on your smart meter. And I'm like, what? But that's the way it works, and that's the way we are. Which means that we have, right now, uninterested customers because it's complicated and they cannot really follow what's going on. Some are scared because you talk about data and complexity and privacy, and that is bringing people away from the energy transition. Some are frustrated customers, and some are very few happy. I'm in the category of frustrated at the moment because whatever I tried, I face walls of data silos that I cannot really understand. I had some email exchange with some companies that I'm storing because someday I will talk about it. Vice versa, the reality, the situation, the opportunity is we have an incredible amount of data now, which we can use to make better use of the infrastructure. It's a very complex process, but it's a necessary process. During the coffee break, I was discussing with Fight about the problem is, and it's a very simple problem. Well, tragic, but simple. If we really believe in the energy transition, and we believe this is affecting the whole planet, the bad news is there isn't enough copper to make it. If we continue working the way we have been working so far. Because so far we were not using intelligence, we were not using data, we were just putting copper in the ground. This philosophy just doesn't work, and it's not possible because we don't have the material to do it. Forget about the problem also that we don't have the people to put things in place, but even if magically we find people working for free, we won't have materials. And that's the major roadblock that we understand. And that's why we need to cooperate. This is the basic reason why we need things like Linux Foundation, energy. It's too complex, nobody can do it alone. There is no time, because we look at the plan the politician put in place, very interesting, very good, I support them, but there is no time, that's the bottom line. And we will be too slow if we don't cooperate. And that's why we cannot imagine to build for interoperability with the whole process of standardization that takes 10 years before you have a standard. We need to work bottom up. Interoperability comes from openness. That's a critical point to make the transition happen. So we need sharing principle to basic everything that we are doing. Nevertheless, when you talk about open source as a solution, you hear a lot of interesting comments. And I just put some quotes that I heard when I started talking about open source in some meetings. Oh, it's a low-quality software developed by universities. This is the first idea. Open source is not secure. I will talk about later when we discuss about few point about cybersecurity. It means I don't get professional support. and it will not work for the energy sector because the energy sector is different from anything else in the world. To me, all that is wrong. And when we talk about open source, we refer to software developed as a community process. And that's what here in Everest you know very well what it means. We share the effort and according to clear rules of governance. That's why you need foundations. That's why you have LFE as an example. It's high quality and secure because of validated process of security and high master standards. That's one of the key elements that I learned working the Linux Foundation Energy, and there's serious process behind to make sure that your software is maintained and operated in the right way to give the right level of security. And when you don't follow, rightly so, the TAC, which I have the pleasure to chair, will just kick you out. That's very simple. And also another point for manufacturers, software that can coexist with proprietary solution and it creates a reference model for interoperability. It's not killing the business models at all. It's facilitating business model, reducing cost. It's the opposite way. Avoid vendor locking, giving the grid operator full control. That's why grid operators should take this and go for it because it changed dramatically. It puts the grid operator, instead of being victim of one provider of software that will have to be your provider for the rest of your life, the opportunity to build the grid as an open ecosystem in which you cooperate with several companies depending on the situation. And that all in all brings a cost reduction. This is also so faster and cheaper. It sounds like a dream, but it's a reality. There is another point people in the energy sector don't want to accept. They use all the time open source. This is a slide directly for LF Energy. We come to a situation where up to 70% is open source, even if people don't know it. And it's a process that is growing, and it's a process also that is killing what doesn't work. So there are a lot of projects, but just few that survive, that become relevant and grow, and the community makes them a success. That's really like a process of internal selection to make the project in open source when we intend open source in this way. So important. That's the status in LFE at the moment. There have been in the 2023 have been a fantastic year. We have been experiencing a growth unprecedented and at every level of the membership, and then also with the partnership with Europe, LF Europe, that allows also to have more presence directly in Europe, and also breaking this idea, this is an American initiative at the end. And it's a full stack of projects, and that's where you see really the complexity that I was talking about. There can be a company that can have a product that is very strong at one level, but somebody that can build alone all this stack is not thinkable. And that's where for the grid operation is vital. They need, from the edge services like Everest all the way to system level automation and business management in the company. This is too complex for any possible manufacturer. And I want to bring some concrete example. This is my success story. I love to report because it's been an incredible adventure. I've been coordinating a new project called Platone. It was a project in which we were dealing with flexibility management for distribution grid operator. One of the grid operator was Areti. Areti is the distribution system operator in the city of Rome. Coincidentally, I'm from Italy, but that's poor coincidence. I grew up in Milano, not in Rome. And they were interested of establishing flexibility market in the city, and they were talking to a major company manufacturer that I would not mention. They get to know us in the project, and we told them, we have an open source platform for distribution grid automation. It's called Sonio, and it's something that we are porting to the Linux Foundation Energy. We are creating a community around. We can develop your solution in this platform. These people believed me, I don't know why, it still is the mystery of my career at the moment. They tried the experience in the project and they understood the difference. And after they finished the European project with us, they decided to go seriously. They are trashing away, step by step, their DMS they have, which was a major company that I will not mention, and say, for the moment now, we are in charge of our DMS. We work with other companies, we work also with the traditional manufacturers. They will give us components in our modular system based on the open source Sonia platform. The Sonia platform is the platform of DMS. They are doing it, and just a few weeks ago, there's the first real flexibility market acting in Europe. The time to market for them has been less than a year. Well, normally when they talk to those big companies, they couldn't deal with that complexity alone. They will say, we need 3-4 years, and they say, I have no time. I need it now. My grid is under stress today, not in 3 years. And they nailed it. They have a system in place, they are digitalizing one infrastructure after the other, so all the substation in the city, and they are the first grid operator in Europe running full open source and running also the most advanced digital infrastructure with a local flexibility market and engaging citizens directly in their infrastructure. Basically what we have been talking about for 10 years, they were able to put it in place thanks to an open source approach. Then we need to come, while that's the grid operator perspective, why mobility is so relevant? Well, the grid will not, the electrical systems will not make it alone as well. To make it possible, we need interaction with other infrastructure. My colleague was talking about, with me before, the interaction with other energy carrier, but another important is interaction with other type of infrastructure, like mobility. So e-mobility is the more relevant inter-domain interaction we can think of, and it is coming now. That's another beauty. It has a global impact, so the value of interoperability goes beyond Europe. That's another added value. Good work has been done in the hardware, at least. That's been a very good start. All in all, when it comes to the plug, this has been quickly solved. But the software stack, that's where Everest is active, is the next big thing. And then the vehicle to grid will open new opportunity as well. Issues that I see, there is a lot already on the ground. Unfortunately, built with old principles, this is something that will affect. And many manufacturers have been creating closed solutions, and they support data silos. And that's also within the car. It's not only the charging infrastructure, the car themselves are closed silos. And the result is today, that's my own experience, I don't have free access to my data about my car, which is crazy, but that's what my car manufacturer told me when I asked to have an API to read my data. You cannot. Simple. And we're trying to help in this direction with some of our research in the European project. We have a project Flow, where we are looking at expanding this grid side of what Everest is doing, so providing the platform that I showed before, the Sonia platform, with services, microservices. The Sonia platform is a modular automation architecture in which we have services dedicated to create a link between the grid operator and the mobility operators. We have several partners involved in the project, and cities, and not coincidentally, we have Rome again, because they are my champion right now. I have to have them with me all the time, because I know there we can try things for real. And we are developing services that help drivers to connect to the regions as an open source hosted by the DSO, and they can find not only location but get all the offers connected to how that can help the flexibility. So the grid operator is in the middle, he will need the flexibility. There's also linking the operator from the mobility operator or the operator of the charging infrastructure to the vehicles in the middle, so the people find best opportunity in which not only charge the car, but they can have extra because they can offer the vehicle in terms of flexibility. This will be part with this prototyping that we are doing and integrating this in our open source platform and becoming then new service in the Linux Foundation Energy. On a closing note about open source and security and cybersecurity, just a couple of slides on this. I will say, when I look at cybersecurity, I see two elements. One is the problem of communication intrusion, and so attack of that type. A second is the software intrusion part. When it comes to the first part of the communication, apart from incredible amount of research going on in encryption, interesting experience in the distributed ledger technologies. There are already live demo working. The city of Rome, for example, again, my preferred example, they install at home, at every citizen, they're installing a box that implement DLR technology directly there and make sure there is trust between customers and grid operator. And that's a very interesting point because they have been able to overcome some of the limitations in terms of time, energy consumption, typically associated with this technology, and those are commercial and concrete. So that's good news in that direction. It's independent from open source. But in any case, in this field also, there are a lot of results also from other sectors. So there is nothing specific of energy. There is a lot that can come from other sectors. When it comes to software intrusion, that's where vice versa, we really see the value of open source. That's the counterintuitive part. Openness, increase security. Increase security because you know what you're installing. That's bottom line. In the US, the president so it was directly Biden, as a law, the point that when you deliver software to a safety critical infrastructure, you have to deliver the software bill of material. So it's likely when you buy a product, tell me exactly what is the list of things you're installing. Realizing the real methodology of SBOM is a piece of cake with open source, not the same if you're not using open source. Because you can guarantee what is exactly the tuning because you know what it is. And as I mentioned, the Linux Foundation has a long experience, so it's a process embedded in the foundation, the security. And the more people look at the software, the more likely you have to find weakness and possibility and backdoor that people could exploit. So it's exactly the counterpart of what people think in the energy sector, so going to grid operator and so on, is through open source, you increase your security because of all those reason and mechanism. So in conclusion, open source is a key ingredient for the energy transition. Honestly, I don't think we can achieve it without open source. It's an industrial product. We have the methods and the mechanism through the foundation to really make it at the right level. And because of the time pressure, there is no alternative to this cooperative approach. I thank you for your attention.
Professor Monti.